Hi everyone, Omid from Code Lab here, back with the 5th video in our JavaScript series. In today's video, we will be going into the Part 5 folder underneath JavaScript. In this video, we'll mainly be covering event-driven programming in the web with JavaScript. So in the last video, we kind of went over an introduction to like what the DOM is, how to use it. Now we're going to show one specific use case right here where we want to make our web page interactable. Now, I made a brief mistake at the end of the last video. The functions that I'm going to show you guys here, again, not stuff that you need to memorize. It's just kind of showing you how we can make pages interactable with the DOM. If you're working on a project that uses something like React or Angular or a framework on top of just regular HTML or CSS, you most likely will not be using this stuff because they have their own variants of it. I'm just trying to show you guys how to use this stuff in basic plain JavaScript so that you can get a good idea and understanding of how the DOM works, and then you should be able to use all those frameworks above it from there. Now, first let's talk about what event-driven programming is. So when we use JavaScript in a front-end web development capacity, we often write code that is only triggered when a specific event happens. So like in the last video, I wrote code that didn't just execute like at a random time. I wrote code that only executed when the window first loaded up. Now granted, it looked like it executed on the page load because it did, so it didn't really show event-driven programming well, but that was still event-driven programming. But another better example of this is, let's say that I have a button right here, like up on line 5, and I want to click this and make something happen whenever that button is clicked. Now that JavaScript code that will make something happen to the rest of my HTML document using the DOM, that is event-driven programming because that code will only run whenever the event occurs, which is my button getting clicked. So if you want to do that, it's actually rather simple. So you can actually get an entire HTML element, like a button, from your body, and you can actually get all of its information back from the DOM. So I have my body tag up here. I have the script tag on the bottom this time, just showing you guys like all of the different kinds of way that you can embed JS within an HTML file. It could also be in its own file, but that's besides the point. Regardless, let's try to make a button where I'm just going to make it const, and I'm going to go to my DOM again, and I'm going to say I want to get an entire HTML element. Now there's a few different ways to get it. You can get it by class name, tag names, but I'm going to choose to get it by ID because my button up here already has an ID attached to it. And I'm just going to pass it in as a parameter and say, hey, I want the thing with the my button ID on it. So cool, now I actually have that. But now I want to modify this button, right? Well, what I'm going to do, because we are doing event-driven programming, is I'm going to add an event listener to it, which is basically something that listens for a specific event, like a click, and then it runs a piece of code afterwards. And the way that I do that is by literally passing in the word click as the first parameter to the event listener, saying, hey, when you detect a click, run this code. Now there's other stuff here I could do, like hover, like scroll over, stuff like that, but let's use click for this example. Now I'm going to write in my second parameter what gets executed as JavaScript code when this button is clicked. So for me, it's going to be a function. Now again, sort of some weird JavaScript syntax, like assigning a function to a variable. Basically, this second thing being passed in as a parameter is just a variable, but that variable needs to represent an executable function. So I'm just going to pass in a nameless function with no parameters, and I'm just going to say I want to do a console.log. Okay, and I'm just going to say, hey, my button was clicked. Okay. Now you might be wondering, where is this going to log to in the console, right? Like I'm not running this as a Node app. This is a web page, right? And that's a good thought. So what's going to actually happen here when I refresh this page and have this click me button? You are going to right click on your page and then click on inspect. And this right here is the Chrome developer console. So you have a ton of stuff going on here. Basically, you can see your entire HTML document and all of its code, like your script tags, your div tags, your button tags inside of this elements page. There's a ton of other pages. But this console page is where we want to go. This is called your Chrome developer console. And when we say that we debug, or we often want to look at the console, this is normally what we are referring to, because it's the Chrome console and it's where all of your stuff prints out. So when I say console.log, it's no longer my Node console because we're not running a Node app. This is an HTML app, a regular web page. It's going to go to my browser's console, the Chrome developer console. So now when I click this button, boom, it says button clicked. I can click this multiple times. It'll signal now that it's been clicked 9, now 10 times. But that is event-driven programming. Now, obviously, there's like a ton of different features and DOM function calls that you need to learn to become really good at it. Thankfully, a lot of other frameworks built on top of JavaScript like React, Angular, stuff like that, they all sort of abstract this away into easier to digest pieces because honestly, let's be frank and like real about this, like this code does look a little bit weird in its syntax and there's so many different document functions for the DOM that you would need to memorize to get this to work. So they do make it a bit easier, but this is the general idea of how in vanilla plain JavaScript to modify HTML documents using the DOM. Hopefully you guys found this useful, and that does it for our JavaScript series, but hopefully I will see you guys in a later video. Peace out, everyone.